Welcome everybody to the Morning Update Show. I am your co-host Trey Holiday, and welcome to this beautiful Tuesday. Even though it's raining out there, we're gonna bring the sunshine in. Me and my co-host, you know him, is the Big O. What up, Big O?
Trey Holiday, what's up, man?
What's up?
Happy Tuesday to you.
Yeah, happy Tuesday, my friend. You're looking good today, brother.
You're looking good too. You know, you always bringing all that black girl magic, that melanin to the set.
Hey, you know, I gotta represent local sweatshirt week. This is Debonair Decor. You guys can visit this shop right in the Pike Place Mall, right?
No, but Pacific Place Mall. And Debonair Decor is there. We were actually there opening day. We did a segment over there. You know, that's a great business to support. I know some people miss shopping downtown. You have a reason to come downtown. Go in there to the Pacific Place. It's on the first floor. Got lots of clothes, gear, hip hop, lifestyle stuff. They even sell gazelle frames, like glasses, everything that's in there. And, you know, this wasn't like he called saying, please talk about me. But, right. You know, that's the thing. We just want to support businesses in our community. Yeah,
you know, it's a real lived experience of mine. I shop locally, black, local often. So you guys will be seeing me this week supporting and showcasing some of that amazing fashion.
Well, all right. All right. First of all, second of all, I guess now I want to say welcome to everybody viewing here across the Puget Sound and nationwide. We got people popping up all over the country and some other countries as well checking in. Want to definitely tell you how much we appreciate you. There's also a good opportunity to tag a friend and share the stream so you can share the morning update show with more and more people. Definitely appreciate your viewership. Lots of stuff going on today, Trey Holiday, and we'll get into it. And also, we're joined 2 days in a row now, two mayoral candidates. We're joined by Ace Houston. People might know as the Urban Ace on Twitter, running for mayor. And his platform is more around climate and climate change as well as housing and some other things. So we'll be talking to Ace around 11:30.
Awesome. You know, that's amazing because I feel like Converge is just growing in such an organic, beautiful way. To have two mayoral candidates back to back, man, you know, they knew to come here to get the message out to the people. It's beautiful.
Yeah, let me throw it out there too. Running for mayor, come to Converge. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Let's talk about it. First up, so Seattle Police Department, they had a press conference yesterday. We weren't invited to the presser. I talked to the SPD, and their system is a bit different than the mayor's system. You know, when the mayor has a press conference, they use this thing called WebEx, and they can bring everybody in, or they'll have a pool camera, and the camera is there and it's streamed out. Seattle Police Department in their press conferences have an in-person press conference, and with COVID restrictions. So that means that it was only certain members of the media that were invited to the presser. We weren't invited to the presser yesterday. I will say this, though, is that a lot of times I do hit the Seattle Police Department and they get right back. And we saw that with the case with Hightower when I hit the Seattle Police Department and some of everything else. So we weren't invited yesterday. Hopefully we'll be invited next time. But there is a lot of times we reach out to the SPD about homicides, especially when we want to know about what's going on with homicides in our city and everything else. Would be nice, though, to be invited to the presser, especially right now. So much news around policing is something that we've been covering consistently. But here's a clip right here from King 5. It has Chief Diaz comments on this ongoing situation with two police officers who potentially might have engaged in something they weren't supposed to in Washington, D.C. It's still being investigated.
Well, an investigation is underway. Because of that, the police chief is not identifying these officers. What he is saying today is that he has requested that the Office of Police Accountability determine if any laws or department policies were violated.
Seattle police found out that two of their officers, off duty and out of uniform, were allegedly in Washington, D.C. during the deadly Capitol attack because of another SPD employee.
They saw behavior that they thought might violate the values of this department, and they spoke up. And I thank them for that.
Chief Adrian Diaz says that employee made the department aware of social media posts.
Are these posts that the officers shared themselves?
It was a social media post that they posted. online.
The two officers are now on administrative leave, and the Office of Police Accountability is investigating.
People might question, like, did I come out too quick? You know, because we didn't have everything that is, and the officers might not have done anything wrong. That very well could be, but I feel after Wednesday and seeing something that to me was unprecedented in our history, I couldn't let it just go.
King 5 law enforcement analyst Carmen Best, who is also the former Seattle police chief, says conducting the investigation is critical.
Because it erodes public trust if people believe that officers would be engaged in what is clearly illegal activity and an insurrection on the Capitol building or had any involvement. We don't have any evidence of that yet, or we don't have any evidence to say that did not happen yet either.
The chief's stance is clear.
If any SPD employee participated directly in assaulting the U.S. Capitol, I will terminate them.
And today, members of the Community Police Commission released a statement. They say that they are requesting all internal communications within SPD regarding the attack at the Capitol on Wednesday. They say they're doing that because they want to make sure that SPD policies and practices are meeting community expectations. Now, I did reach out to the head of the police union today, but I have not immediately heard back. Live in Seattle, Natalie Swaby, King 5 News.
All right, so no word back from Solon over at the police union. And again, if the officers went there and participated in the rally, then they've done nothing wrong. They exercise their right of free speech to go participate in a rally. I think what the investigation is whether these police officers crossed the barricade, the police line that was there at the Capitol, or entered the Capitol, so everything else. OPA, they said they're on the job, so we'll see what happens here. It's also interesting. Chief Best now is come out on two different issues now, and she came out on Solon saying that Solon should resign, and also I think clearly she's had some comments to say about this here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that her comments were spot on when she's talking about the transparency and the trust that really needs to be like rebuilt. Almost from the ground up with regard to SPD and the community. It is important that Chief Diaz take this seriously and that the OPA is investigating. It's not something that we can allow to slide. I think she's absolutely right in that regard.
What was interesting yesterday and what quite didn't make a lot of news is that Chief Diaz also talked about the murders last year in the city of Seattle in 2020. The total number of homicides were downgraded from 57 to 50. And you remember the last day of the year, we wanted to acknowledge all those people that were murdered in Seattle. So many of those murders are unsolved. And actually yesterday, I was on Facebook and I came across this post from Alicia Dasa. Her son, Connor Dasa, was killed out there near Rainier Beach. And I called Alicia yesterday and I said, well, do you mind? I know the big news is about the officers in DC, but what she put up on her page yesterday is it's been 8 months today since someone killed our son. We still have no information and no leads. I feel like I'm sitting on the top of a roller coaster waiting to come down, and I'm just stuck hanging there. And speaking with Alicia Dawson, I thought that was important today. I know that there was all this stuff about what's going on in Washington, D.C. and officers and everywhere else. But, there's another crisis that's occurring in our city, and that's the crisis of homicides. That's the crisis of murders and unsolved murders. And you know what Alicia Dawson said yesterday? She said, Omari, you can go ahead and put that post up. And I appreciate you saying his name, Connor Dawson Holland. But she said, you know what? I get a lot of coverage, but there's so many other moms that are out there who don't get any coverage, who no one is asking about, no one is following up. They haven't got any leads on the homicide. And I'm talking to Alicia Dawson, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to put another show together, because she said that a lot of parents don't like talking to the other media because they never humanize their children. And what I told her, as I said, we would be more than happy to put something together here where people can come on and talk about their children that were murdered in 2020, and there's no leads. There's been no arrest.
Yeah, absolutely. This is why community media is so important. We say it in different ways, but this is one of those things in terms of really reporting the issues that are wrecking our community. We think about the parents that are left over, wondering about who did this to their child, and to get no kind of answers yet, to still be hanging in the lurch, almost as Alicia said there, like just hanging in wait. I am glad that we do have this media outlet so that we can bring light to it and continue to say their names again, so that SPD and those who are really working on these investigations understand that the community is really demanding answers around these unsolved homicides. It is important, and I'm glad that Converge can step up to lead the charge in that regard.
Yeah, well, people have been watching the national news. The FBI is saying that Armageddon is on the way. The FBI is issuing warnings saying that capitals all across America, including the nation's capital here in Washington, D.C., that people should be on the lookout for armed protests leading up to Inauguration Day, and depending upon what might happen between now and then, be on the lookout for violent activity. Here's a clip right here from CNBC.
Well, Shep, good evening. The FBI sending a memorandum out to law enforcement agencies across the country today, looking at a whole host of information that they've received from their law enforcement partners like the DEA, DOD, Parks, the Marshals, and really getting into what people are talking about online through open source, and letting states know that there's a couple of different concerns that are coming up that they want them to be aware about. The first one is this idea that there could be armed protests at state capitals across the country by the end of the week, around the 16th or 17th, to dispute and to protest the results of the election. The second thing that they're taking a look at is this idea of a armed uprising that people are talking about starting around the 16th of January in Washington, D.C., perhaps at the Capitol again, if somehow Congress invokes the 25th Amendment. Now, as we know, Congress can't invoke the 25th Amendment, so there's probably no likelihood of that coming. But I think the important thing here is that the FBI and other law enforcement agencies are acutely aware of what people are saying online, what they're saying on social media, what people are telling them, and they're trying to be focused on the potential threats long term. Now, some of these threats are already being investigated. The Boston division of the FBI is saying, look, we've looked into this right now. We don't have any sense that there's going to be armed protests at state capitals in the states that they cover. That's Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine. But as we look towards the broader inaugural on January 20th, we know that law enforcement is already stepping up their security plans, putting them into place earlier. Things are going to be locked down earlier. NYPD sending 200 officers to D.C. is an example to help supplement law enforcement efforts down there. Overall, Shep, a very different security picture, both at states as well as at the inaugural in D.C. as we come up on the 20th.
They're planning, then the FBI and everybody else is planning, and we'll see what happens. But what's interesting right now, Seattle Times just put out an article right here this morning, and it says, grabbing my notes here, FBI report warned of war at Capitol, contradicting claims there was no indication of looming violence. A day before rioters stormed Congress, an FBI office in Virginia issued an explicit internal warning that extremists were preparing to travel to Washington to commit violence and war, according to an internal document reviewed by the Washington Post that contradicts a senior official's declaration that the Bureau had no intelligence indicating anyone at last week's pro-Trump protest planned to do harm. It looks like this is drip, 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 but it looks like the truth is coming out. I mean, you have to wonder, how does the FBI not know? And actually, there's a lot of other groups. The Anti-Defamation League for weeks was saying that this was coming. So there was private groups that were saying that this was coming. And the FBI initially said they had no indication. Turns out that the FBI was lying, and that they had actually put out an internal warning the day before.
This is exactly why it's important to follow up and figure out who the officials are that hid all of this, that denied it, that said no. Even when we think about, I heard before, horses, actually, just even having horses out is really like a crowd controller. And that was something that's like, normal for them, when they're preparing for things like this. So once again, I think that there's a lot of folks that are going to be reprimanded in this regard, because there was way too much complacency across the board.
Right. And for those who this might be a surprise to them to see what's going on here right now. FBI Director Wray, who was appointed by President Trump in 2019, he said that the biggest domestic threat was actually white supremacists.
Between the years 2000 and 2016, the white supremacists were responsible for more homicides than any other domestic extremism movement. Now, I see the distinction you're making, homegrown versus domestic. But let me ask you, can you quantify either one of them for us?
Well, in terms of number of arrests, we have, through the third quarter of this fiscal year, had about, give or take, 100 arrests in the international terrorism side, which includes the homegrown violent extremism.
This year.
But we've also had just about the same number, again, don't quote me to the exact digit, on the domestic terrorism side. And I will say that a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence, but it includes other things as well. I think the greatest terrorist threat to the homeland is the homegrown violent extremist. I will say that we take domestic,
foreign-inspired,
which is jihadist-inspired violence. That does not mean, by any stretch of the imagination, that we don't take domestic terrorism, including hate crime committed on behalf of some kind of white supremacist ideology, extremely serious.
That was the director of the FBI back in July of 2019. This threat's always been there.
Always. And the thing is that this is what a lot of folks are even talking about on the social media ethos is, Black folks have really been knowing that this was going to bubble up once again for generations. Because we've experienced white privilege, white supremacy, racism, a real hatred. We've experienced it in our daily lives. So we knew that it existed. We knew it was never eradicated, no matter if we had Barack in office or anything like that. We've known this. We've known it was coming. A lot of us in community have been talking about this for many generations.
Right. And a lot of the people, when you talk about what they're saying that are armed protests in the capitals and everything else, I've been talking to a lot of people on the right, and what they're saying, that's not their intention. I mean, maybe they wouldn't tell me, but pretty honest conversation I've been having for about like 8 months, even through CHOP and everything else. I like to talk to a lot of people, and you find now that a lot of people who are just hardcore Trump supporters are now distancing themselves. It's funny because it's now, these people who stormed the Capitol are a different breed, and I think it's disingenuous. 75 million people voted for Trump. I don't think you could say that 75 million people agree with what happened there in Washington, D.C. and everybody's for this, that, or whatever. That's just, I don't think you can equate that. And me, I like to stay away from these polarizing narratives anyway. It's a lot of people who are like, well, if you voted for Trump, you sanctioned this. I don't really think that. 75 million people voted for Trump for different reasons. But clearly there's people who are very supportive of President Trump who were involved in this situation there in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, you can't deny that at all. But I do think that you're absolutely right with regard to some of the neutrality. It's just the things that do not get discussed. It's that gray area. We always talk about this side and the growing polarity of the two like extreme sides. But you can't really generalize any of that. There's a lot of people that no matter if they supported Trump or not, they disregard these actions completely. They think that it is an attack on the Capitol was the wrong way to go. So that's definitely a sentiment that's out there as well. All
right. So the president finally spoke. He's on his way to Texas, I believe, to the Alamo or somewhere in Texas. But a reporter asked him, does he take any responsibility for what occurred there in Washington, D.C.? This is from CNN.
Your role in what happened at the Capitol, what is your personal responsibility?
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, and I've seen it both in the papers and in the media, on television, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other places. That was a real problem, what they said. But they've analyzed my speech and my words and my final paragraph, my final sentence, and everybody to the T thought it was totally appropriate. Okay, thank you.
Trey Holiday?
Totally appropriate. I mean, the way that this guy does not take responsibility for anything and tries to, dissuade everything. I don't know why people even support that. I would always want a president who really stuck to their laurels. And it just seems like, he does not like to take responsibility for anything that he was actually pressing. He was fanning the flames for months. And for him to not be like, he said it, we love you, hey, remember guys, we're on the side of law and order. I mean, he was talking to this group as if they were his own. And for him to then, in that clip right there, talk about the riots in Seattle and Portland and try to compare the two. Nobody was going to the Capitol in committing a felony by entering unlawfully, period.
Right. I think that what we see a lot right now is everybody's making equivalencies, which is real interesting. Even here in Seattle and Seattle media, one thing I'd take a stance and continuously take a stance when we saw these acts of violence and these acts of destruction here in Seattle, came right here on Converge and called it out and told people, if you disagree, change the channel. We don't need you here. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing with Seattle Police Department. If you think they was okay though at some of their crowd control techniques and you were all gung-ho, it's okay. You can find another network. We're always going to want to err on the side of humanity. And that being said, though, it's interesting here how a lot of the local media, they're still wanting to talk about Seattle protests. And Seattle protests is a big deal. And we're going to be talking about that for a long time. But a lot of these are the same people who probably just a month ago, or, if it was, and even during the BLM protests, were the sanctity of the Capitol, the citadel of our democracy and everything else. And people are really comparing the United States Capitol, right, with so many of these other things. The U.S. Capitol that had the vice president and speaker of the House in there. And, there's videos out there. People are like, hang Pence, because remember earlier that day, and we had read the statement that Vice President Pence had released. You got people out there chanting, hang Pence, hang Pence. So everything else, they're really talking about they want to kill Pelosi and all these things. And when we talk to some of the local people here in the media, well, on our Seattle Capitol Hill was this or the chop was that, and it's difficult. It's apples and oranges, but all of a sudden the people who had reverence for our Capitol and reverence for the police and everything else, now a bit quiet.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, when you have these strong opinions, and then folks do something to kind of dissuade that, cut it down, cut it in half, then you want to start backing up. But the truth of the matter is that when you actually have that sentiment of just being genuine, when right is right and wrong is wrong. Nobody should have been putting buildings on fire that had tenants at the top. I don't care if you wanted to try to destroy the Starbucks at the bottom. That right there is wrong. And what they did in terms of their insurrection to the Capitol, this entire coup really that was planned and then pressed through, and also complacent on the other side. I mean, ultimately, this was not cool, and this is not a comparison at all to me.
Right, and we'll move on to other headlines here, but there's already been 2 Capitol Police officers who've been suspended, 17 others that are under investigation for being complicit in what happened there. I think that when this is all said and done, this is going to be a very, very sad day in America, and we'll find that it wasn't just the protesters who came in there. You see that they didn't send the National Guard. The FBI sent a warning the day before. You have officers who are complicit, and a lot of officers who really fought for their lives, literally in defending the Capitol. But drip, drip, drip. We'll see what happens. Moving on here to it's still Washington, D.C. I'm on a local story here. Representative Pramila Jayapal tests positive for coronavirus after being locked down with lawmakers who wouldn't wear masks. This is David Gutman in the Seattle Times today. Representative Jayapal tested positive for coronavirus Monday night, her office said, after she was in lockdown during Wednesday's siege of the Capitol and in quotations here, with Republican lawmakers who cruelly and selfishly refuse to wear masks. And I believe the representative is at least the second and maybe third that's now contracted coronavirus. And I guess they had these guys huddled in their safe room and in very close quarters, and some people didn't wear masks, and the representative now has COVID.
You know, wearing masks is the simplest thing that everybody can do right now. And the fact that our nation is as divided as it is, that there's still people that are lawmakers, okay, that understand the severity of this pandemic, yet refuse to actually play by the rules that all of us are playing by, is just wrong, man. And it's a sad story to hear that Representative Jayapal is now tested positive after such, her just being there, trying to do her job, again, not knowing that this was going to happen. That's the sad part.
Right. And we're going to skip over a few headlines today, and we'll put them back in tomorrow. We have Ace Houston, who's running for mayor. And we'll be talking to Ace here shortly. One or two other more stories. This one hits a little closer to home, to the Central District. This is from CapitolHillSeattle.com, Capitol Hill Seattle blog. And what it says here is, now hiring the soon-to-open Central District Amazon Fresh grocery store. Company officials have confirmed to CHS that Central District store is the new mixed-use development on 23rd and Jackson, will be part of the company's first Amazon Fresh groceries to open in its home state of Washington. Again, this is a development that was built by Vulcan. And I know you've been involved in this process, Treyana, back from when the Promenade, 23rd, was still the Promenade. Then it was sold to Vulcan, and they've built this development there, 500 apartments. I know one of the arguments is that it's literally the heart of the Central District. Right across the street is where Quincy Jones and Ray Charles used to have jam sessions. Mm-hmm. And the majority of those apartments there are apartments that legacy people in the Central District can't afford to live in. And so it's a big eyesore when you talk about gentrification in the Central District. Also makes you wonder why Vulcan, as much money as they have, felt the need to put a development on 23rd and Jackson to further displace people who can't afford to live in the building. Yeah, this is really a sad part for me, because the truth of the matter is that community was asking, Vulcan representatives trying to figure out how we can actually bring more community into that space. And the truth of the matter is that we didn't get many answers when we were asking the questions. We didn't see them being transparent about this. We were asking specifically if Amazon was going to be the store that was there. And to be honest, when we think about the heart of the Promenade and the products that the Promenade had, really spoke to the community. Again, when you're thinking about places to get your spices, your seasonings for certain cultures, that's where you could go, was Promenade. So, we were asking specifically in terms of replacing the grocery with something that was definitely connected to community, and we weren't getting answers then. They would not actually give us a statement about it. And so here we are. We knew it was going to be an Amazon-owned place, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done here in terms of negotiating with community. I'll be honest with you. It was 9 months ago, and I was there at the meeting. It was a community meeting, and it was all the developers who were building developments there in the Central District. And you had people like Lake Union Partners. You had was a community house with Jackson Heights. You had First AME, and every single developer could tell you how many Black contractors they hired, how much money was spent with Black contractors. We got to understand, it was one of the last live streams we did before the COVID shutdown. And Vulcan is the only company who refused to say how many Black contractors they hired, how much money they'd put into the community, how much investment they put there. And then also 9 months ago, people were asking Vulcan, like, well, what store are you going in there? We're hearing rumors that it's going to be Amazon Fresh. Vulcan denied everything. They also said that there was going to be community meetings to talk about what store was going to go in there on 23rd. And really, this is in CHS, CapitolHillSeattle.com, where you can read more about it. But the news really broke because of the liquor license. They filed for a liquor license. And so Amazon didn't let anybody even know before, or Vulcan didn't let anybody know beforehand exactly what was happening. And again, Vulcan now owns most of Yesler Terrace, which was when we talk about how there was public housing in Seattle, and the city sold it off. And, you know, it just makes you wonder why Vulcan has so much money and resources. I'm a capitalist. I'm not against that. You know what I'm saying? I want my business to grow and thrive. But why they felt that they had to put these developments in neighborhoods, traditionally Black neighborhoods, poor people, and build developments that poor people can't afford to live in.
You know, it's a growing concern in community. This is why community groups that really are working for affordable housing are so important, because we see that for-profit developers really don't have a care for the folks that have been displaced. And one of the things I will say is that they do have some units that are there that are below market rate, but even those rates are not affordable for folks in the central district that have been displaced.
500 people. They've also put 500 units there on 23rd and Jackson. And so now Jackson Street, highly congested, 500 units right there. And so when we talk about, see, the density it's always interesting. It would be great to see 500 units go in on the top of Magnolia. Big 500 unit Vulcan development, Queen Anne, some of these other neighborhoods that are out there. But, you know, people, when it comes to our neighborhood, the Central District, and there's some other neighborhoods in Seattle as well, they can vouch for this. It's like, oh, density is good, as if we don't deserve our space and a little bit of elbow room and something else. So, yeah, I mean, that's just people checking the box. The city says, oh, make a few units affordable and everything else. The whole point is, there's this ongoing conversation about gentrification here in Seattle, and especially in the Central District. But we continue to have developments that come up that people who grew up in the Central District can't afford.
Yeah, one other thing I really want to say about this is that this is not the time for Amazon to be really a part of something like this. I think Amazon has been such a major key factor when we talk about gentrification, when we talk about redevelopment of neighborhoods. Amazon and the employees that they bring to Seattle, they have been a major factor with regard to us still being the #2 city of growth, even in 2020 during a pandemic. It is because people come here for tech jobs, and they are one of the major tech suppliers in terms of employment. It is a sad day to be hearing that, you know, they did not want to connect with community, that Vulcan did not reach back out to say, this is the move we're making, and that Amazon said, you know what, yeah, we're going to go ahead and be in this Vulcan building. Another thing I want to say about this is this. Vulcan only came to the Central District because their profit margin was more because of the area. They were able to buy low, sell high with regard to getting the rent from all of these folks. And that's really what it's about. It's about really utilizing the spaces that we had and saying they can come in here at a lower rate than they can in Magnolia, that they can come in here and actually make more money. That's really what we're talking about here, Oz.
All right. And in the article here, it says, we look forward to working with Amazon and the new Amazon Fresh grocery store. Welcome to Seattle. It says Michelle Merriweather, President and CEO of the Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, in the Amazon announcement. Merriweather says this store will create hundreds of new job opportunities for people in the community and provide them with easily accessible, low-cost options for groceries, which is especially important during these tough times. So what would have been interesting, though, and this is from Michelle Merriweather, the Urban League. We talk about people reaching out and talking to people in community. Urban League, definitely part of our community. What's not in this release, though, is it would have been great to say that Amazon's going to present hundreds of jobs that pay high enough for people to actually live in that building. And that's what's not going to occur here. And actually, during this pandemic, more essential workers, and essential workers usually have the highest COVID rate. So it would be good to see. I'm glad the Urban League said something, but it would be good for the Urban League to challenge Amazon to how about we get hundreds of jobs for people, because all that's going to happen, and to be honest with you, is that money's probably not even going to stay in Seattle. People have been displaced, so people are going to commute in, an essential worker from Burien or from Federal Way or Des Moines or somewhere else to work in that store, and then take that money back out of the city. So it'd be interesting to see even what the net gain is, because the majority of these essential workers can't afford to live in the city. Someone who's working at a grocery store, they're not living in the city. They're coming into the city. So it's interesting to see if those jobs, at the end of the day, actually benefit the municipality. But I think that our goal needs to be, we need to move past grocery store jobs and grocery store wages. And if someone's going to partner with the biggest company in the world, let's look for jobs where someone can afford to live in that building that Vulcan built.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why The gatekeeping is still alive and well, y'all. Just period, point blank. You know what they didn't do? They didn't actually ask anybody who was a part of really pressing them with regard to community concern. Africatown Community Land Trust has been a leader with that, really asking all of these for-profit developers that are in the Central District, hey, let's check in. Let's figure out ways to make this equitable. Let's figure out ways to have our people and our community be a part of this process. And so they did not ask K.Y. King Garrett for a comment. And ultimately, I think that, again, this is a story that indicates when they check off a box because they got one Black person, Michelle Merriweather at Urban League, to say this great quote, and they can put it in the article. But the truth of the matter is that they needed to connect back with community groups and community leaders who have been pressing them since day one, and they did not do that. So once again, this is another indication for me of that gatekeeping piece, and it's unfortunate.
All right. I'm sure we'll be following this up. Real quick, before we get out of here, we bring Ace in because we want to hear what Ace has to talk about running for mayor. Legislative sessions going on. One of the big things that people are talking about down there is the police issue and police reform, some of everything else. Mayor Durkin has been saying that, well, she's all for reform. She's all for police reform and this and that. I had an opportunity to talk to the mayor and I wanted to press her on it to see, does she still stand by her words that she's been saying now for months? And this was, I asked the mayor here, actually, you'll see the question is what's your position now, today, on police reform as it goes down to Olympia? I wanted to follow back up with you now that police issue is squarely down there in the state capitol. What's your position on police reform? One, do you think that it needs to occur? Two, what are you supporting? Three, what are some of the snags that are out there that might need to be addressed?
So, Amari, I absolutely support it. And in fact, it's got to happen in Olympia. And I said in June a number of things that I thought we needed to do and supported. It looks like some of them are going to happen. I support there to be an office with independent investigations, and the governor's proposed that. I believe there should be statewide certification for police officers. So the bad police officer, if they're fired by one police department, they can't just go to another one. And Jamie Peterson, Senator Peterson, is sponsoring that. I think it stands a good chance. We also have Representative Johnson, who's a bill that will limit certain tactics that we already limit in Seattle, chokeholds, the requirement of de-escalation and the like. I support that bill. One bill that I am very, very supportive of, and I hope that Olympia passes it, is a bill to change the way that police arbitrations occur. The national studies are clear that one of the clearest obstacles we have in holding police accountable is the ability for police officers to go to an arbitrator and get a decision overruled with a whole new hearing. We saw it happen here in Seattle, and so I'm supporting a bill that will change that, and I'm hopeful that Olympia will pass that. That will do more to improve policing, I think, not just here in Seattle, but across this country.
All right, so the mayor is supposed to be testifying down there in Olympia. I mean, this legislation, it's a lot of different legislation down there. It has a lot of momentum. We're going to definitely keep our eye on Olympia.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things we have to do as community media, because again, we have seen, things kind of shift, but I'm glad to hear the mayor actually, keep her stance on this one. It's really important to a lot of us out here in community.
All right. We are going to take, where are we at here? I think we're going to break one. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back, we have Ace Houston, and he's going to tell us why he wants to be the next mayor of Seattle. You're watching the Morning Update Show.
My parents coming over here as refugees meant that they didn't really have anything when they came to America. Having reliable healthcare and having a reliable doctor was really important. Cộng đồng của tôi, trạm y tế của tôi.
我的社区，我的诊所。Mi comunidad, mi clínica.
بلشدة هي بقارها.
My community, my clinic.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your band, the Big O. Want to take a moment here, first of all, to say thank you for your support of Converge Media. We definitely wouldn't be here without you. Secondly, I want to thank everybody who is a supporter of Converge Media on Patreon. We definitely appreciate your support. And for those of you who might not know, I'll let you know, we operate 100% off of donations. Some donations big, most donations small, but we love all donations all the same. If you haven't done so yet, I want to encourage you to go on our website to whereweconverge.com/donate and subscribe. You click on the Patreon link and you can subscribe for as little as $5 a month. There's higher tiers beyond that as well. And just know that your subscription literally keeps us on the air. Once again, I want to thank you for all your support. All right. Welcome back to the Morning Update Show. My name is Omari Salisbury, and I'm here with just the amazing and radiant and wonderful and beautiful Trey Holiday.
Thank you, Omari. It's always great to be in studio with you and in space with you, brother.
All right. So let's get down to business. We officially on the ballot, Andrew Grant Houston, but around the neighborhood, they call him Ace. Oh, yeah. Please bring in Ace Houston this morning.
Good morning.
What's up, Ace? How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Man, we're doing good over here. We're on a roll. 2 days in a row, 2 mayoral candidates. You know what I'm saying? We must be doing something right over here.
Oh, of course. If anyone has their ear to the ground of the community, it's y'all.
Well, appreciate it. So we're going to jump back into it. So today it's good, both of us, because you're on the video link. So we're going to kind of go back and forth asking questions. But first of all, why don't you tell the good citizens here of the Emerald City a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking just a little bit more on what y'all talked about earlier, I am a Black and Latino architect, so all about representation in spaces that are mostly white. I am a renter, first and foremost. I'm also queer. I live here on Capitol Hill, and so I'm just around the corner. I am someone who's passionate about sustainability, and that doesn't just mean environmentally. That also means economically and also socially. My biggest passion in the work that I do is creating housing and also creating places where people feel like they belong. And so that's a big piece of what I want to do as we come out of COVID, come out of this current crisis and deal with all the other crises that we're dealing with right now, is create that community that we know and love and push that forward, have that be existing throughout Seattle.
All right. And now, before we jump into your platform, and I know that the climate is one of the big things that you talk about in sustainability. Before we do all that, City of Seattle, city with over 700,000 residents. The city of Seattle has 11,000 employees. There's 35 department heads that report to the office of the mayor. And beyond the big political issues that we have going on in the city, there's actually just the business of running a city. What makes you qualified for the position of mayor?
So I think a number of things do. I sit on the board of FutureWise Washington, and we are seen as the land stewards of the Growth Management Act. And so that's something that we're really focused on actually this year, as we try and update that and make sure that we provide more environmental justice, provide more housing in the state. And so there's a lot of conversations, and I really know policy very deeply. I've also been involved as an architect, as a project manager. That's really what I do. I'm managing projects that could be worth millions and millions of dollars, just like the Vulcan project that y'all talked about earlier. That project is probably clearly $20-30 million. It's about making sure that every piece of the team, whether that be engineer, structural, mechanical, engineering, plumbing, the contractor, that we are all working together in harmony and working to get those goals and that vision completed. And so I think there's an easy way for that to translate as we try and deal with these multiple crises right now, also making and understanding that connection between housing and transportation, and being able to ensure that every piece and every department in the city of Seattle is not a silo, but is actually working together and doing it most efficiently is a big piece of what I want to do as mayor.
Right. And, you know, I know Triana has a lot of community-oriented questions, as usual. But as mayor, you'd be mayor of the entire city. I think 88 square miles. We try to throw out there a lot, hundreds of thousands of people. What are some of the issues, pressing issues citywide that you see? Because I know that Triana is going to bolt down on some that really impact our core audience. But speaking to the city as a whole, what are some of the issues out there that you see that you want to jump on, or what are some of the great things that are occurring that you want to enhance?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest ones is just housing affordability. It doesn't really matter how much money you make. Everyone is having issues either affording the place that they're currently in, or in many cases, wanting to be able to create that generational wealth, be able to afford a home. Right now, the average home price is around $800,000. So you basically have to be in tech, and you also have to be like in a relationship or married to someone else in tech to be able to afford that kind of house. And so I really want us to look really hard at the way that we're using land in the city, because most of it, you can only build that one single home. And so if you're redeveloping that, or if anyone is just trying to sell that house, it's easily going to go for over $1 million. So how do we get more townhomes, row houses, fourplexes, duplexes, triplexes, condos, so that people can have those steps? So there's like, okay, I can't afford a single family home that's $800,000, so maybe I can afford a condo that's $300,000 and build and save and get to that townhome that's worth $500,000. Get those steps in there in many ways so that anybody can afford to live in the city in general. And I think another big part of that too, related to climate, is also getting people to live close to the things that they want. And so some great examples actually during COVID is allowing for more people and businesses to operate outside, to have more cafes, to have more street life. I think that's been something that's actually been really successful and that people really love. Even a great example of that down on the south end is Lake Washington Boulevard, and opening that up to be a great place for people to go biking and walking and rolling. And so trying to bring more outdoor culture and have that be an asset and something that people can do anywhere in the city is really important to me.
Right. And now the city of Seattle, like most big cities across America, they're broke. Like COVID has busted the bank 100%. People are suffering. Individuals are suffering, small business, big business. There are some businesses that are booming, but clearly this pandemic has a grip on the city of Seattle. We've talked about some of the things that the city has done, and it's actually been innovative nationwide in responding to community, especially those in the marginalized and vulnerable communities. And actually, we forgot to mention today, maybe we'll do it at the end of the show, the city just made $2.17 million available in a COVID relief fund for those that are in the hospitality industry. We're going to be talking to the city more about that. As mayor, what would you do in regards to battling this pandemic? And what are some of the things that's already existing in the city that you like and agree with? And what other kind of innovation would you bring in battling this pandemic and spearheading Seattle's recovery?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it, and it's in my mind, is that a lot of the programs that we're seeing had a lot of politics to it, had a lot of back and forth, and I feel like in some cases we weren't responsive fast enough. And so I hope to help speed up some of those processes, because there were many businesses who have now gone out of business simply because we did not respond fast enough as a city. The other thing that I want to really push forward is this understanding that because we have a regressive tax system and everything is based off of sales tax, the fact that we built 10,000 less homes last year compared to the year before is one of the major reasons why we had the big budget hole that we had. And so when we start to allow for more housing to be built, when we start to speed up that process and actually have it in other places outside of the central district, when we start to allow for those 500 or not even 550 unit projects in Magnolia, in Laurelhurst, in many places in North Seattle, we actually bring in money, general funds that we can use for all the programs that we have, and we want to build and scale up even more. I know a big discussion last year is about participatory budgeting and getting money for that. And so let's build the housing that we need in order to then bring that money back into the economy, make that circular, and so that we have more funds to use on all the other things that we want as a city.
All right, and Trey, I'm sorry, because now we've crossed into your time, but something just came up here that I want to talk to Ace about. Looks like Mike Solon has released a comment here. We've got it up on the screen. I interpret the calls to tender my resignation as political rhetoric. I will never bend to the cancel culture as I lead the union with conviction, Solon wrote. He added, however, that if at any point you feel this union needs a course correction, I will always be open and receptive to your feedback. Now, this brings up a perfect opportunity here, and thank you, producer Nikki Barron, working behind the scenes, getting stuff up back there. Your thoughts on Solon, real quick, and this his retweet and the calls for Solon to resign, even from Scott Lindsay and from Chief Bess and Mayor Durkin and the city council, but also in police negotiations as a whole and the bargaining agreements when they're contract.
Well, speaking just straightforward as someone who's Black, I definitely have a very shared experience with y'all in terms of how I interact with the police and how I see policing in our community in general. But let's just be very direct about Mike Solon. What this is not cancel culture, it's accountability. And we made that clear yesterday, the city council, in terms of unanimously voting and asking for his resignation. What I want to see is Chief Diaz respect that and honor that. And whether it takes Mayor Durkin to actually ask for Chief Diaz to fire Mike Solon, let's make that happen, because this is a part of that accountability. This is someone who is clearly not living up to his promise as a servant of the public, because that is what the police are supposed to be. And we need someone else who is in charge of SPOG, the union, to even start to have a conversation as to what reform, in addition to redefining what public safety looks like in Seattle, is going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really brings me to what we saw, this summer, when we see the collective people coming together, voicing their concerns about the city. We saw Mayor Durkin do some response to that, talking about direct investments into the Black community, later said BIPOC. But ultimately, I really want to ask you, if you are to become mayor, how do you see, making sure that those investments are sound and that there is a growing investment in the communities that have actually really experienced a bunch of divestment?
Yep. And so I think a part of that is being very transparent, very honest about what's going on, and also to have layers of accountability, whether that be the creation of a civilian board that actually has powers to remove officers. I think that's a discussion that we need to have, whether that be when it comes to developing policy. Something that I'm actually doing throughout my campaign is I want people to go on my website and actually submit policy points, because I think we all share a vision as to what we want our city to be, but we don't necessarily agree on how to get there. So I want us to do that very quickly. In terms of my intent as mayor, it is really my belief to try and work around the inability to have affirmative action in Washington State. Unfortunately, we still haven't changed that. So that, in my mind, is part of the challenge of trying to directly invest in the Black community specifically. But what we can do is we can start to use programs, say like the Right to Return program that we have for affordable housing, that disproportionately helps Black people, helps our community, helps people of color in general. And so let's look at those programs that we know disproportionately help those with the least. Let's help those with the least first. And in that way, create this rising tide that lifts all of our boats together.
Yeah, I also think here in Seattle, we have a unique, growing collective action with regard to community organizations on the ground. And we talk about them not having the resources that they need and working over capacity to just try to be strongholds in their community. How do you foresee being able to change that shift so that those community-led organizations are actually able to enact the changes that they want to see in their communities?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think, and you got to this a little bit earlier, is I don't want to be a gatekeeper. If I am to walk through this door and become mayor and step into the halls of of Seattle that way, I want to leave that door open for other people to follow behind me. And so part of that is rebuilding that trust and also having the trust in those organizations in the community to actually do the work that they do. When we start to fund, whether it be housing or services for our most vulnerable in the city, we don't want to have all of these strings attached that actually make it that much harder for organizations to be able to do the work that they do. In many ways, that's one of the reasons why we have such a difficulty with affordable housing and public housing, is because at the federal level, around the Reagan era, they started putting in all these attachments that made it basically impossible to build housing. And so we are seeing the impacts of that, and we are dealing with it firsthand on the ground. And so one, let's change the systems both at the city level to be able to fund quickly our organizations and our partners that are on the ground. And let's also have those conversations at the federal level where we say, hey, we know clearly these laws, these amendments to laws need to change in order for us to get the investment that we need. Because at the end of the day, one of the big things that we have to work with is the fact that as a city, we have to have a balanced budget. And so if there's anyone who can make that direct investment and that those funds available to us, it is both the state and the federal government.
Absolutely, Ace. Man, I wish we had more time, but I just got one more question for you. We also really saw such growing polarity. We're seeing it in the nation. We are seeing it in our city. I want to ask you, as mayor, how do you unite Seattleites?
I think that it comes down to being at the table together and having an equitable conversation. A big part of Black Lives Matter in general, for example, is stop killing us. And then on the other side, they say, well, you know, I don't know, because we might have to like have less police and that makes me feel uncomfortable. And it's like, okay, well, let's break that down. Let's be honest about what you're feeling and have those conversations. And I know myself, if I'm elected as mayor, like that is my responsibility to have those conversations for people in our community who are simply uncomfortable, and to then help us make that equitable table. Because at the end of the day, we are all living in the same space. Our experiences as Seattleites, and also those who are outside of the city who either were displaced or want to become Seattleites, all of those things are connected. And so if we have just a little more grace, if we have just a little more openness and receptiveness, if we start to reach out our hands and help each other, really lean into our mutual aid, I think we can find that common ground that both respects our experiences and our identities as people of color, and also provides the quality of life that everybody wants. I think we all really care about Seattle and each other in many ways. And it's about really breaking down those barriers and being able to have those conversations honestly and directly.
All right, Ace, do you have a few more minutes to stay with us? It looks like you might. All right, so real quick before I jump into my next question, I'm hearing the comments. And I see some comments are over there like, well, hey, what happened in Washington, D.C. doesn't excuse violence on the left and everything else. I can tell that we have new viewers to Converge. So first of all, I welcome you here. And the comment made clearly shows that someone's new to our platform. You know, we're one of the few media outlets that has covered it, been on the front line, and we call things wrong. I was the only reporter there on the ground on May 29th when these people were there tearing up the international district, and I'm on tape challenging them, and I also told them they ain't gonna bring that shit to the central district. So we've called out violence all over the place, and that's why Converge right now, where you see where a lot of people, when elected officials stayed quiet, we was talking, right? And now all the elected officials are talking, but some of the media on the right is quiet. We've consistently been able to stay in our lane because you know what? We just call it like we see it. And we're always willing to err on the side of humanity. So I just had to throw that out there for our new viewers. You're more than welcome to go back and check May 29th, the very first day of the protest. And you'll find me there. Get away from them buildings. Those are small business. What are you guys doing? Kicking in this and that. We challenged it. live streamed it. Eric Calligraphy went at one time streaming. He went and pulled some kind of incendiary device outside of a Starbucks that was getting ready to explode. It's on tape. So I welcome new viewers here to Converge. And I welcome you to go through our archives, and you'll see we just call it like we see it. Ace, let's talk about infrastructure here real quick. You know, our brothers and sisters over there in West Seattle, they're struggling right now with the West Seattle Bridge. We hear that. One of the audits said that the budget for maintaining the bridges in our city should be almost like $36 million a year. Right now, we only spend about $6 million a year, and it's called deferred maintenance. So the maintenance on our bridges is being deferred. Our infrastructure is literally crumbling in front of our eyes. But, you know, infrastructure isn't sexy. That's not something that you get people going on and all these kind of things.
That's why you elect an architect for mayor, because all the unsexy things, all the complex pieces that go into our sidewalks, which we lack in so much of the city, our protected bike lanes, because those are things that people also want. Any way that we get around, those things are all impacted when we talk about wanting more trees, more green space. When we talk about municipal broadband, that means every single time that we open up a city street, that all this construction is going on. And so one of the things that I really want to focus on in general is starting to coordinate those things, because we shouldn't decide not to do something simply because there isn't, let's say, a lot of money, or it's extremely complex. Like, I really want to work on that complexity and lean into it and say, no, we're going to figure this out. We're going to coordinate the 5 different things that we want to go on the street, related to also the housing that we need to have happen, and to sit there and break it down. That's been a big part of what I did also this last year on Twitter when it came to both the budgets as well as some of the other discussions happening at the city level. Is I tried to break it down as much as possible so that people can engage. Because I think that's a big part of it for people, is that they don't necessarily have the knowledge or expertise, but that doesn't mean that they're not impacted by what's going on. And so I want people to better understand what is happening in their city in some ways, to be able to provide that response.
Right. And when we talk about business, I mean, clearly, you know, there's a big divide in the city, and I don't know if it's real, imagined, maybe some of both. When we talk about big business and business organizations like the DSA, the Chamber of Commerce, then you have other groups, smaller business, and then you have this gap here between big business and you know, small entrepreneurs. What are you going to do to be able, if elected mayor, to be able to kind of bridge the gap between like big business and small business, address some of these grievances that might be out there, but most importantly, get business moving in our city?
So I think part of that is just my experience as a small business owner. I run my own architecture practice, and I have been impacted by COVID and by the just lack of opportunities. And so I really want to build those opportunities back again. I also want to really emphasize and prioritize allowing people to both create startups, create new businesses, and be able to be supported by the city in order to grow those small businesses into the next medium businesses, the next big businesses, but also to do it in a way where they honor and understand their commitments to our community. Because at the end of the day, what we don't necessarily want to see is another Vulcan, in what Trey brought up earlier about not having those connections to the community, not having those pathways where other people who built themselves up and were supported by community in turn around and say, hey, I did it this way. I also want to empower you to be able to do it as well. And when we talk about our recovery and what that looks like, I really want to try and keep our dollars as local as possible. And so even the housing that we built, I really want to emphasize what's called cross-laminated timber, or CLT. So it is something where it uses wood, and we can grow those trees here in King County. We actually have the most timber-related jobs of any county in Washington State in King County. So once we start to build this housing, and if we use this new technology, we actually keep that money locally and start to feed and have this circular economy that everyone can benefit from.
All right, Ace, before we let you go, we're going to bring the banner down over there, and we're going to give you an opportunity to look directly into your camera and tell the good citizens here of the Emerald City why they should elect you for mayor.
So right now we are dealing with multiple crises. We are dealing with both the COVID crisis, but even before COVID, we already had a homelessness crisis. We were starting to see the effects of the climate crisis and even the social justice reckoning that we are dealing with right now. And so in order to solve those, I believe that we need to lead with housing justice and allow for more housing to happen across the city. And I know that given my experience as an architect and be able to look at the systems at play and connect those dots and help us move as quickly as possible to the next Seattle, the next great era that we want to see, that I'm the best person to elect for that future. So please vote for me.
All right, Ace, appreciate you. Thank you for coming out on our show. You know what I'm saying? And
I always appreciate y'all. You do a lot of hard work, and I will never forget that pink umbrella and you with that video during the protests.
Believe me, I won't forget it either.
Thank you so much for being with us, Ace. You know, this is great to get your platform out there to the people.
Have a good day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Check back in with you.
Y'all too.
Wow.
So there you go. So candidate number 2 out there, Ace, and you know, like I say, he comes from an architect background, and one of his platforms around climate sustainability. So
Yeah, and housing justice. And Ace is, you know, somebody that I know in community, right? And have been in various meetings and organizations and workshops and things like that with, again, somebody who really has his finger on the pulse with regard to the housing diversity. I love how he was speaking up about bringing a lot of that diversity back into Seattle because of the affordability issue. There's a lot of different ways to tackle that. So it was great to hear that.
Right. And for our viewers that are still with us, I know that we're over time here. Nikki Barron put a lot of work in getting some COVID information out. So I just wanted to be able to touch on that. I know that we're over time, but it's important that we discuss on these. These are the numbers. Confirmed cases, 265,312. Probable cases, 11,374. Total cases, 276,686. Hospitalizations, that's always one of the numbers that we really look at there. 15,978. Total deaths, 3,699, and percent of deaths, 1.3%. I believe that number is much lower, by the way. This is what's going on down in Los Angeles County. It said today officials warned that there are COVID outbreaks everywhere in LA, that anytime you leave your house, you're in danger. Goodness gracious. Indeed, there's currently 538 open outbreaks at businesses in LA County, the most ever reported. It says here, no customers have been infected as part of these outbreaks, according to county data, though officials say it would be incredibly hard to link someone to illness if they've contracted it there, which is like LA is wild. California?
Yeah.
But you know, ain't nobody staying at home there. It's a stay-at-home order. Then people, man, I know so many people down in LA, they're not staying at home. And this was out of the Seattle Times, the positivity rate of COVID-19 tests in Tulum, Mexico. So now for our younger viewers, people might have seen on Snapchat and on Instagram, there's a lot of people that's like, you know, the new spot, especially for Black people. You know, they're going to Tulum. Tulum has made like an effort to reach out to African Americans like, hey, man, come vacation here. Why go to Cancun? Why go to other places? The positivity rate on COVID-19 tests in Tulum, Mexico is nearly 50%. And the weekly numbers of COVID-19 deaths quadrupled from the week before Christmas to the week after, according to the federal government data. It's a lot of people went down there to Tulum, to Mexico. And the thing is that, you know, returning here to the United States, the level of care is so much higher than it is down there in Mexico. And Mexico actually has one of the highest death rates of COVID. One other thing I want to throw up here, and we're going to get ready to get out of here. We're going to talk about this more. I'm speaking with the mayor's office, trying to get somebody lined up so they can explain this more to community. Application open for $2.17 million in direct cash assistance to hospitality workers impacted by COVID-19. You can find more about that if you go to the mayor's website or City of Seattle website. But definitely, it's direct cash assistance for those in hospitality. So maybe somebody who's a worker there at a hotel, people in the hospitality industry, 2.17 million that the city is open. That's why Seattle's continue to be innovative when it comes around COVID. And we're going to be interviewing someone from the city to get more specific information about this so we can share with community. I know a lot of our relatives and loved ones work in the hospitality industry. Trey Holiday.
Oh, yeah.
What a day. You're talking fast over here. It's like an auctioneer.
Trying to get us out on time. Appreciate that, Oh.
Yes. One more thing, too. Tonight, writer's block, 6 o'clock. How could I forget this? This is a big deal tonight, 6 o'clock. We got, man, so many people joining in here. We got Mike Davis from the South Seattle Emerald. We've got Naomi Ishihaka from Seattle Times, also a Garfield Bulldog. Melissa Hellman from the Seattle Times. Liz Brazil from KUOW, and our own Julia Jesse. And we're talking about the Capitol Riots right here live at 6 o'clock. Anywhere that you are watching the Morning Update Show, you'll be able to see that.
You know, it's so great to see our programming grow like this. And I think that that is a special that I know a lot of folks will be tuning into, because these Capitol Riots really threw us all for a loop. Oh,
man, I'm telling you.
Serious.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate you guys staying with us for an extra 12 minutes. We went over time. I also want to thank Ace Houston for being our guest today. We'll make sure and keep up on his Mayoral campaign. Thank you, Director Oya. She's like, oh, you're looking into the stars. Any last words, Trey?
You know what? Make it a great Tuesday, y'all. I know I will. And one last shout out to Debonair Decor. Go on down to Pacific Place Mall. Check out a Black-owned business. Another folks from my bro from community. Again, Black-owned. I encourage you to support.
All right. I'll see you again tonight at 6 p.m. for Writer's Block. But as for the Morning Update Show, we'll catch you tomorrow at 11 a.m. And until then, peace.
Lift every voice and sing till earth in heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising